Hello, good afternoon. Thank you. Welcome to the Parrot, the Politics on the Parrot. My name is Sainabou Baldeh, and today joining us we have Dustin Pickering from Texas. Say
Hello.
hi, Dustin.
I hope everybody's going to enjoy the program.
Thank you for joining us today. So today, unfortunately, we didn't have the guest that we had planned for you, due to some difficulties on his part. But hopefully next week Friday we'll have him here to get the discussion going. But today, Destin and I will be kind of just getting a general view on the politics in the United States, especially with Texas right now, because Texas has a lot going on, and they kind of
Correct?
recovering from a lot as well. So
Right.
just kind of get into that and just have that discussion and see where we are right now and how do we see ourselves moving forward, especially with a whole new president.
hmm
Now the Democrats are back in the office, so a lot is changing quickly and swiftly. All
Right.
right, so Justin, do you mind telling us a little about yourself?
Well, I'm mostly a poet. I keep in touch with the politics a little bit here and there, and I did kind of keep a careful eye on the power grid situation that just happened, not too long ago. And that was interesting because I was affected by that. I'm in Houston specifically, and my power went out. I was praising, I was praising God when I noticed that the power was not out when I got up, and then I went to bed and I woke up and everything was out. It was pitch black, and I was like, "Oh, I praised a little too soon," you know. But
Yeah.
it was difficult, but it was intermittent. The power would come on for a little bit and then go back off for a long period of time, and then there was a period when my neighbors across the street had their power working and I did not, so I was a little jealous. I think they were setting us against each other.
Yeah, they had you guys riled up. They wanted to see what was going to happen.
Right, and it was a very tricky situation. I heard some people, about half the state lost complete power, and a lot of it was due to frozen gas lines and things of that nature.
Yes.
And they've, Texas is not used to extreme cold. We're used to really hot summers, and so they were also preparing for the summer and getting ready because that's when the demand increases exponentially. And so when the cold was coming, and of course, we knew a couple of weeks in advance. I guess they ignored it, or they didn't have anything prepared. Uh,
Yeah.
the gas lines freezed over, and froze over, and then they that was a problem with the keeping up with the supply side. So it was very tricky. I know there's various ways of looking at it. From my point of view, we just weren't very prepared for it. That was my take on it. And ERCOT, our in charge of our power grid, did cut the power. And an article in, I believe it was the Statesman, Austin Statesman, said, no, it was that was one of the papers out of Austin, um, said that they cut it because if the demand had continued and the supply was not able, then they would have had to possibly cut it for months. So that
Mhm.
was
So they cut it off for a couple of days to save you guys that long-term
right. It would have
headache.
over pressured the grid, and so they
Gotcha.
they cut it. I mean, that's what I've read. You know, that's
That
my
is
take
what
on
they said. But do you
it.
think the fact that the way that Texas system is set up, basically, when it comes to energy, do you believe that worked against you? It proved that there was actually holes in the plan because,
Yeah.
like you said, a lot of people weren't prepared for it.
Right.
But at the same time, Texas is known for extreme heat and extreme cold. So it kind of,
Yeah, not this extreme.
from an
Yeah,
outside
yeah.
perspective,
Right.
to
I
us,
mean,
it's like that's something they should have calculated that it's a possibility. There's climate change also
right.
affecting the world. So it is something that I would have assumed they would have kind of gone through. It's like Florida with their
Right.
hurricanes. When there's hurricane
hmm
season, we have the time that the power goes off, but we're prepared for it. We know that we have to go through this every year.
Right.
It's not like Nicole just woke up and came to Texas like this
That
year.
that
So
extremity was not we were not expecting. And it
expecting
was
that.
like very very low uh cold, and we were not we had about 10 years ago we had some issues with very cold weather, and they had made some amends to the system, but I don't think they were really prepared for the extremities and I think it's a matter of, you know, the cost benefit analysis. I mean, how often are we going to have these? And I think, I think now we're probably going to be hopefully prepare a little better for stuff like this, because it looks like it's going to be a lot more frequent than it has been. And so hopefully something will happen that will, put Texas back in the. I mean, I've read a lot about the issue, and I think that we have we have the renewable energies that are coming up, and the company Tesla put a giant battery in Angleton that they say will power 20,000 homes on a hot summer day. So that was out of USA Today. So I think there's some things that are happening that are dynamical that are going to help quite a bit with that system. But overall, I I don't know what I don't have enough knowledge to really say
Yeah.
what
At this point,
legally
it's
could be
just more
done.
so we're all just hoping for the best to happen to just make sure that
Correct.
we don't have a repetition of that, because there's a lot of
Mhm.
lives that were lost during this time,
Yes, there was
and
a
yeah,
lot of
it was
trouble.
difficult.
There
Yeah,
was a
it was very
time
difficult.
there were people that died of carbon monoxide poisoning, I believe, because they were bringing their some people were burning furniture. I mean, it just got really tough for people, and people were bringing in their barbecue pits and just lighting up the
Yeah.
charcoal in there, and it just there were kids that were that died from that, and it was very scary. We haven't experienced anything
Mhm.
like that at all.
I
So
can
in a
imagine.
long time, it's been a while. The nation in general is going through quite a bit in this period of time with the COVID and
Yeah.
and everything else.
Speaking of COVID,
Hmm.
I know that yesterday was the mandatory mask rule was actually basically lifted in Texas. So that means now that you guys can go into establishments without the requirement of wearing a mask. But
Right.
the rest of the United States is still dealing with the pandemic. So it's not like Texas is not going to be affected. Do you think most
Of
people are
course.
currently scared of a spike back in Texas and in turn kind of just, starting the
Right.
pandemic up again? Because, it doesn't make sense
Well,
if
it's true. I mean, I agree
there's
that there should be that Abbott's rule, the governor rescinding that was a very bad notion. And I think that, but there are a lot of companies that are still requiring that if you come in to shop or to come in to do any kind of business, they still want you to continue to wear the
yeah.
mask. So there's some people that are still fighting back, and I think for some reason Texas kind of has a hokey pokey cowboy image, and it likes to sort of sport
I
its
know.
independence
I
a little
saw
bit.
some images.
Hmm.
They were actually filling up events in full capacity, and not a single
Yeah.
person with social distancing. There wasn't any masks to be seen. And
Yeah.
to us, it's more so, I would believe there's a lot of US citizens that kind of feel like it's disrespectful, especially those that have been
Mhm.
affected tremendously by the pandemic, seeing it as they're not doing much to help stop it, because that's what caused it in the
True.
first place. So it's
Right.
not really helping us. So
I don't know about
why
the
would you
most of the
think?
state. I know here in Houston, it seems like we're trying to buckle down. In Houston, we had an order that at one point they were going to say $2,000 fine if you were not wearing a mask, but the police union said they would not enforce that, but they would expect people to wear the mask if they caught somebody maybe doing something in the public, that when they were not wearing a mask they would give them a mask or suggest hey what's going on here. So it was more like a pressure mechanism to kind of keep people in line here in Houston. So I don't know what's going on in a lot of the other parts of the state with this rescinding of the mask order. I think it sets a kind of interesting precedent for the rest of the country to look at us and say, "What are those crazies thinking?" We're fighting a battle.
Yeah.
As the President Biden recently stated. And I think I read his speech just moments ago, and one statement stood out to me. Unity is what we do together as fellow Americans, and I want to emphasize the word "do." So action is important. It's not just paying lip service, And I think that was a very important statement that he made in his speech. Yeah.
Because that is
So
something that currently America is dealing a lot with.
mhm.
The whole unity part is, most people would
Very
say that,
much.
the country is very divided still. And
Mhm.
I'm from an outside perspective, I kind of seem to agree with that, because you don't hear a
Right.
lot of people still understand that, okay, we don't have to agree on everything, but there is a middle ground for us. And that is
Correct.
something, like what he's saying is basically to just say, we kind of have to fix this together. It's not a this state has to do this state has to do that. It has to be, we all need to agree on something we can do because it's affecting all of us, our
Right.
economy, our people, and how can we best take care of all of that. So right now it is it's a bad example. Texas really is kind of setting a bad example.
Right.
And it kind of scares people like me that are in Florida because Florida would do something such as this. This would be such a Floridian thing to do as well.
In general, the South. I mean, let's look at the fact that that also in Texas. I just saw an article today concerning something HB 3326. Representative Brian Slater, an anti-abortion act that he's a freshman in the government, and they're
I
proposing
read about
death
that.
penalty for abortion.
I
That's
actually wanted
wild.
to really hear your opinion on that matter because
It's ridiculous.
I looked at that and I was like, I could have distinctively remembered this as a thought process about what America is. America
Hmm.
basically stands for the human right,
Right.
for freedom of humanity, and what the fact that you are in charge of your decisions and what you do with yourself, like your body is your
Correct.
own. And that's what makes this country very attractive to a lot
Mhm.
of like immigrants. That's what makes it attractive. So to see that, I read that and I was like, doesn't that go against everything that is American? And Texas is a very pro-American state.
Yes.
So I'm like, you're going against America by doing that, because a death penalty for
Yeah, and I
a
think
child that you might
I
not
think the
take care of.
GOP in general is like, there's been a lot of very similar especially, the last few years of Trump, when we had more conservatives in the Supreme Court. It seemed like there was a lot of challenges to Roe v. Wade, and like you said, we have the right to the privacy and the right to our physical being.
Mhm.
And I think, and read that, and I was like, what are you trying to accomplish here? I think he's trying to score points, political points or
That's
something
that's
for,
what I thought
yeah.
so as well. I was like, you're a newbie in the field. You have to come up with something that's outrageous, that's there for people to actually talk about you and put you in that mainstream line. But there are other three acts there was some similar bills have been tried to be passed and they didn't go anywhere. So, but
Right.
what makes him think this bill will?
Exactly. I don't think it'll go
That's really
anywhere.
where
I
my
think
thought
even
was. I'm
most,
like,
I think
really?
most Texans don't even think that's reasonable. I mean, there's probably a few fringe people here and there that are really bitter about abortion or something. I really don't know. I've never met anybody with those kinds of extreme views, and most people I know, even the pro-life people, they don't believe that you should get the death penalty for having an abortion, even here in
Bullshit.
Texas. I mean, yeah, it's
I've read
it's
reading further into the article itself, it was actually saying that it didn't matter where like how the baby was conceived. It was
exactly.
just more so like,
Hmm.
if it's in you, you have to keep it.
Right, and
And
that's
I'm like,
problematic for so many
that is very
reasons.
problematic because not only are you gonna put on a burden on somebody that cannot handle the standard of living for a child in America, you're gonna also be affecting the government more because guess what? If they can't raise that kid, they're gonna ask you for the money to raise that kid. And if
Correct.
they can't raise that kid, they just either gonna give them away or put them on the side of the street or put them in front of a church. It's basically
Hmm.
what they're gonna do. And so who does that create more problems for?
Right, and
The
not even to
government itself.
consider that if the child is a product of of a sexual assault or something of that
Of a
nature.
rape, you still had to
Yeah,
keep the
yeah,
child. That the trauma of that in itself, it
and
kind of undervalues
it's
the mental health of the woman. And so
right,
for
exactly.
me,
That's totally.
it became really personal the more I read into it. I'm like,
Hmm.
this is not just disregard of a person's choice with what they can do for their body. It's a disregard of that person's health as well, mentally, because
Right, right,
you're going through a traumatic event and then you're being told, okay, this is what came with your event, which is a child. Now you can't do anything about it. You have to keep it. That's a constant reminder for some people. It is not something that people want to live on the daily. And then just
right,
putting them in that state, it's not healthy even for the child that you're trying to force them to bring in. So it's really not a healthy state for anybody.
right.
It's not good for
That's very,
anybody.
very true. It's disastrous. I mean, I don't know why anybody would even think of. I mean, Texas has posed some strange. There's some quacks here. a lot of quacks that get elected somehow or another. I mean, of course, we know one that's Houston Cruz, Senator Cruz.
Hmm.
Yeah,
He's an interesting character.
he is very interesting. He's kind of suave. I've written to him a couple of times and complained about things, including his many years back. I think it was under President Obama where he forced the shutdown over the healthcare bill. And I wrote to him, I was like, "What are you trying to accomplish?" And he said it was not a very popular healthcare bill. And I'm like, "No, no."
No, no.
And then I wrote to him about the arts, about funding of the arts under Trump, and he wrote me back on that and said, "Well, we believe in private economy should be sponsoring the arts." I'm like, "Well, they're not doing a very good job here in Texas of that. I mean, I've had a little literary journal that I do have some help here and there, but we face a lot of difficulties. So that's one thing
Yeah.
I'm very passionate about."
That is something I've actually really observed about in the United States, which is kind of funny to me because it's an entertainment industry. Like the entertainment industry in the United States is beyond anything around the world, if you ask me. So it is kind of sad, I would say, that we don't see a lot of investment in the arts here, especially in even in just the
Right.
public schools in itself. And
Hmm.
in the
They
back of my mind,
defunded.
it's almost humorous because it's like that's where most of your money is
They
coming
cut
from
it a
there.
lot in the education too. They cut a lot of the programs. They cut the funding, and I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with that. I mean, the more culture you have, the more you cultivate your soul, you cultivate your ethics, you learn more about people across the world, and I think it's very positive to have people who are educated in both culture and in the other things like science and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's I think people need a roundedness, and music education, for instance, is very positive for cultivating people's character. And I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with cutting funding for things like that, but
Yeah, that part has always affected me because I love art. I believe
hmm
in I believe in theater. I believe in paintings. I believe in music. Those are things I believe they create a person because you're being put into places you never thought you can be at. And that as you're creating new neurons by just doing that. You're always learning
right,
new stuff and it becomes fun to you. And yes, it is as important it is to learn your science and your math. It is just as important to know how to draw a circle perfectly with your wrist. Because well,
right,
roundedness is what makes us human beings. It's called balance. You have to have
right. Yeah, absolutely.
a good of both, a good balance of
hmm
both. And it's something I feel very passionate about that. So I actually do know I do share that feeling with you.
Absolutely.
I
You know, and
really
uh, and I think another thing that we have lost out on, I think, in cutting the funding to the arts is something that Biden also brought up: empathy. And we're living in an age now where we're at each other's throats. There's been the violence that's occurred against Asian Americans, against the Capitol, against so much going on in terms of people just forgetting to sit down and relax and think about others for a minute. We even have now. I was just looking at an article at Yahoo. Um, More unaccompanied children at the border now than ever.
and we
I
have a
think I looked
prediction
at
of
the number.
117,000 coming in by the end of 2021.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's
looking rough. I mean, people want to come in, and I don't know what the protocol is for how they handle that. It's an overload, if you ask me. It's like lots of people coming across. We don't know who is
who's coming. And they are creating facilities to kind of help
mhm,
with that. But at the same time, it's not being built fast enough
right,
counterpart to how many people are coming in every day. So they already had like a 5,000 like increase just within the last couple of months, and that's insane in itself. And there's
right,
a whole pandemic going around in the world, so it
right.
is
Yeah.
not safe to just have a lot of people just come into the country not tested, not vaccinated, things that matter. So it becomes a really complicated situation. And I wonder how the Biden administration will really handle this.
I'm
I see
looking
that
forward
they've
to that.
sent people around to kind of check in and see how they're living, talk to the kids, and see how they could best deal with the problem. But at this point, it almost looks like it's a lot for them. It's a lot for them to kind of just handle and to kind of get together and to start. So hopefully within the next month or so, we'll see how they proceed with that.
Yeah,
I like to know.
I think President Biden, part of his thing was he was going to form a task force to look into the matter, and I remember him saying something of that nature. And I mean, I'm hoping I was really concerned when this was going on. I didn't learn about the entire issue until under the last president.
Yeah.
And I wrote to companies, corporations, and said, "There's a humanitarian crisis going on. Can you guys do anything? You've got the resources. Can you send something?" And I had a one response back from Dove, the company Dove. They
Yeah.
said the first they said, we can't do anything because if we did everything that people requested, basically we would be broke. But then they wrote somebody above that wrote me back and said, yes, we were looking into it and we're posting lists. We can't do anything because of the legal structures in place that are not allowing donations from the private sector or whatever. And then they said that they would post articles and stuff and on a list of places that could accept donations for their employees to look into as a response to my letter. And that made me proud. I was like,
That's
I
good.
could convince
That's really
somebody to
impressive.
do something. Yeah, that was the Unilever company that creates Dove soap products and stuff. And I wrote to them. I was like, this is terrible. We've got to do something. Something needs to be done. And they like I explained, what they did, and that was nice of them to address the issue. And that was a surprise to me.
Do you believe that if more citizens in the US did what you did, it would have kind of moved the process a lot faster in how we can resolve the issues by reaching out to more private sectors as well as reaching out to,
Right.
the Senate, the mayors,
I did
and
all of
just
that, and I got a
your local
lot of.
lawmakers.
And it was strange. A Texas congressman was working on helping fight or take away the bill that was blocking the private funding. Something to do with the Homeland Security and how they can't take funding from private donors, like even individuals at that point. And so I was looked into that, and it was a Republican congressman who was trying to make amends with that to be able to go forward and let people do the donations, because I don't remember what the issue was exactly, why they wouldn't do that. It had to do a lot with they didn't have the resources to look into, like, what was being donated and to proper handle that. So it's all about these resources. I mean, I don't know what else to think. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think if more people had written to companies to put more pressure, I mean, I was really concerned because these are children we're talking about.
these are true
They're
in freezing
separated from their
conditions
families.
because
And
the places that
very,
they're being held right now, they're not exactly built for that. They're meant to detain you for
mhm,
maybe 2 or 3 days to
right,
make you feel uncomfortable so that you can leave. But in this case,
right.
they're there past their 3 day limit, and some of them have been there for weeks at a time. And it's just not a safe condition for anybody, talk less kids. Like, and most of these kids are younger than 13.
Right.
So that should raise a
And
lot of
with
concern, and it
no
should
sanitary
kind of force us to
products,
speed up things.
there was no sanitations products like soap, and there was a story out of Brownsville about, it was like an old Walmart that they were using to detain kids, in the old building in an old Walmart, and how they had you know painting of Trump, all over the wall on one of the walls or something. It was really strange, and I was just like, gosh, this is kind of like a nightmare, you
Yeah.
know,
You were
and it was very
mentioning
scary.
earlier about how you were more into poetry, and I do know that you're also a publisher.
Hmm.
So how does this, like, I know being around in your environment and looking at everything that's going on, and I know authors, they normally kind of use something from what's happening in their real life into their work. So how has that everything happening in Texas and in the United States, how's it affected your work right now?
I don't know if not directly, and I try to keep my head afloat. I do occasionally write political poetry, but I don't find it very effective from my end. I don't find it to be very persuasive to people or to make any kind of change that I would like to see.
I'm
So,
sorry. You're
mhm.
breaking up a little bit, so we might have lost some of that you said. You were breaking up a little.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just saying that I don't find as far as being a poet and an artist, I don't find my specific art to be very persuasive to people, and I even have a hard time on a just a rational level getting across to people sometimes. But I do create, and I feel like these turmoils and this stuff. I mean, like when the power went out for it was 3 days straight. I had no power. I took my little phone and I used it as a light, and I wrote poetry. I wrote like 19 poems or 17 poems, I think, in the 3 day period, and I put it into a book, and that book is now coming out from a press out of Calcutta, India, in the next month or so. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know how. I have a hard time persuading people using art, but I do think that the conditions create an emotional state that empowers it to a certain degree. And I try to emphasize again empathy and kindness to people. And I write a lot about kind of a mystical approach,
Okay.
about how we need to be in touch with each other and listen to one another. And I use Facebook a lot to try to, you know, open up
Right.
avenues of communication, just try to get to people what's concerning people, what thoughts do people have, you
Yeah.
know even on a not necessarily strictly political or but just like a social level, what's concerning people, how are people thinking these days, and it's kind of a
Such, speaking of that, like right now, I know the vaccination is going out, and it's something that Biden has been, which we just watched earlier. He's talking about its availability to a lot of people. I know there's a larger group that is kind of against taking the vaccination. I
Mhm.
would love to hear what you felt about how you felt about that. Because I know, like we talked about, there was a spike in the country. It's a lot. Texas not masking. Now there's people that don't want to take the vaccination because of the lack of trust that they have in the government due to, the last elect that we had. And so there's a lot that comes with that. And for instance, would you
Right.
take the vaccination yourself?
I don't believe it should be forced on people. I mean, I'm going to sound kind of ironic. I do believe that it's probably going to be a necessary step, definitely to move forward. But I think enough people will voluntarily choose to have the vaccine, including myself, when I get a chance, to be able to create the herd immunity that's necessary to help kick it. They're saying, that the mutations and whatnot, it's going to be hard, and maybe even some worse problems coming up as far as some of these microorganisms. But I don't as a kind of like left leaning libertarian, I don't believe in imposing on people and allowing them to choose. But I think that people collectively can make positive choices on their own when we but in some instances, I think in emergency cases like this, I'm kind of conflicted on the issue because I don't want to impose it on people, but I do want people to know that this is a very important issue. And so there's definitely a lot of conspiracy oriented thinking that I don't think will ever get across to such people. They're entrenched. And I feel like I've talked a lot about it online. I even have friends that are in that mindset, and I respect their right to be that person. And but at the same time, it's like do we have room for doubt at this point? I mean, how many people have died to COVID,
But that's
and
the
how many
thing.
more? Hmm.
We may not have a lot of room for doubt, but doubt was presented. For instance, right
Right.
now with the whole Como situation that we have going on, Como was somebody
Hmm.
earlier last year that gave us a lot of information about COVID that kind of kept us in check. That was somebody we trusted, and now we have the sexual harassment scandal going on. A lot of
The
people feel
nursing
like
homes. Yeah. Mm.
lot of conflict that this creates as well in the human brain. We know how we, like
Right.
psychology wise, you already know how we think. So it's
Hmm.
something that we have to also look into. And the whole Comor thing, personally, I was a little baffled because, and it put me in a tough situation. So I can't
Yes.
imagine how most of like how the rest of the United States feel. And do they want him to resign? Do they want him to apologize? are we gonna convict him before there's actual proof and like a thorough investigation has been done, or are we just going to cancel him like we do everything else without finding out any real information? So
Right.
it's a lot going on right now, and it's getting a
Absolutely.
little heated in New York.
Yeah, and then the nursing home scandal I was just reading about too as well, and it's very sad to see. You know, you invest something in of yourself into these leaders, and they lie or they do this for political purposes. And I know that a lot of people have said that part of that is they didn't want to give leverage to the president at the time against Como, and then you have the sexual thing going on, the scandal with that, and it's like, can we trust our leaders, or are they just like pawns that are just
Telling
being,
us what we want to hear.
yeah, and are they, not only are they not trustworthy, who would be trustworthy in such a position of power,